when you call her a martyr in the title of your book, that's how the Jews viewed her.
Yes,
What did that mean to the Jews?
that she died b'kiddush Hashem. She died sanctifying the name.
Which
And
means what for my audience who may not be familiar with that terminology?
okay, so that she died as because she refused to convert because she stayed faithful to her religion. And in
Mhm.
a lot of the Jewish sources, she died while saying the Shema.
Shalom and welcome to Hebrew Voices. I'm here today with Dr. Sharon Vance, who's an associate professor at Northern Kentucky University in the History and Geography department, where she teaches courses in Middle Eastern and North African history, Jewish history, the Holocaust, history of the Arab-Israeli conflict, world history, and U.S. history. She received her PhD from University of Pennsylvania in 2005 from the Department of Near Eastern Languages and Civilizations. After working on anti-Semitism in France and colonial Algeria, her current research now focuses on anti-Semitism in the U.S. Some of her publications included, and there's a bunch of publications here. We'll put links on the website. The one we're going to talk about today is a book she wrote called "The Martyrdom of a Moroccan Jewish Saint." And I heard about this relatively recently, and I was very surprised. I have a PhD in a field of Jewish studies, and I'd never heard of this person. I went to 12 years of Jewish school, day school, right? It wasn't just the afternoon Hebrew school, and I'd never heard of this person. And there were Moroccan Jews in my school. I would imagine they might have heard of her, but I had not. So tell us about this Moroccan Jewish martyr. I hope I'm pronouncing her name right. Sol Hachuel, or how do you say her last name?
That's okay. So
Okay.
yeah.
All right. So tell us about Sol Hachuel.
Okay, well, she was born in Tangier, um, perhaps in 1817, and she was martyred in Fez in 1834 because her neighbors stated that she converted to Islam and she denied having converted. And so she was first brought before the governor in Tangier, and then word got out of that she was there and she was refusing basically to convert. And then the Sultan, who at the time was Mulay Abdul Rahman, demanded that she be brought to his court, where
Mhm.
they tried to persuade her to convert, and she refused. And so, therefore, she was publicly executed by beheading in Fez in 1834. And she's buried in the Jewish cemetery in Fez. And the book contains a photograph of the of her gravesite with the a description on the tombstone of her.
So I think we have to set some context for the audience here because let's say she had converted to Islam and changed her mind. Why would that get her executed in Fez in 1834? What I feel like the general audience is missing a piece of the picture,
Oh yeah.
especially coming from America. Like, how is this possible? You get executed because. Oh, explain, please.
Okay. So, a couple of things. There's the fact that Jews had the status of dhimma, which means they were a protected minority, but so they had autonomy within their community, but they were subordinate to Muslims, and that included um, subordinate to Islamic courts. So, for example, if there was a dispute between two Jews, it would stay within the Jewish court and the Jewish community. If there was a dispute between um, a Jew and a Muslim, it would go to Islamic courts, and Jews weren't allowed to contradict Muslims. That was part of the subordination.
Subordination's a really big word.
Right.
Give us a more like regular English word. What do you mean by
Okay,
like?
so
What do you mean by that?
okay, so that meant that there were restrictions. Jews were legally inferior to Muslims.
By law, they were legally inferior before
Yes,
the law.
yes, yes,
So I
yes.
know we talk a lot in America about systemic racism. This is systemic. Maybe it's not based on race. Depends what Jews are, right? That's complicated. But
Right.
systemically, by law, Jews were second class. They weren't really even citizens, but they were subordinated to
Second class
Muslims,
subjects, yeah, and
subjects.
as non-Muslims. Yes.
Okay, and Jewish testimony had no value. Am I right?
No, 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 no,
Okay,
no.
I'm not right, or I am right. Sorry.
Yes, yes, yes.
So in other words, when
Correct.
Sol said no, I didn't convert,
Right.
and the Muslim neighbor Tahara, according to one source,
Yeah,
said she did. Well, I mean, we don't listen to you. You're a Jew,
yeah. You're inferior.
right?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
so why do you get executed for? Explain that to the audience because that's
Okay.
not obvious.
So
Meaning, if someone today, and I honestly don't know the answer to this question, if someone today in Pakistan converted to Islam and then decided, no, I want to go back and be a Christian or something, right? Would they be executed in Pakistan?
yeah, because
They would, even today.
apostasy from Islam is punishable by death.
Okay. All right. So apostasy isn't just an insult, it's actually a capital offense,
It's a
meaning you get the
capital
death
offense.
penalty.
Yes.
So and to convert to Islam, all it really takes is to say the Shahada, which I want to say is something like 8 words or something like that,
Yeah,
right? Meaning
exactly. It's basically one sentence.
so
Yeah.
one sentence,
Hmm.
and then if you say, oh no, I didn't, number one, you say I didn't say that, or number two, you say, no, I said that, but I didn't mean it, you
Yeah.
get executed.
Yeah.
Okay, just as simple as that. Okay. So look, there's this and there's so many things to talk about here. So all right, so you're the expert on anti-Semitism. Is this anti-Semitism?
That's an interesting question. So,
What
for
is
one,
anti-Semitism?
okay,
Maybe that's too big of a
well,
question for
let's just start with this because I don't want to be here all
yeah.
day. But what I when I did the research for this and I
Hmm.
looked at the how Jews were referred to in fatwas, in Islamic legal texts from Morocco, I didn't see any like, and this was from the 19th and early 20th century. And these
Hmm.
are legal texts. When I did research on history from historical texts from early 20th century in Arabic on the Maghrebi Jewish community, I found a lot of anti-Semitism, and most of it was translated from like European anti-Semitic texts from the 19th and early 20th century. Okay, so there is
Okay.
anti-Semitism, but within these legal texts, Jews were basically referred to as Ahl al-Dhimma. In other words, people of the Dhimma, protected people. They weren't specifically referred to as Jews. Now, the thing is that theoretically you could say, okay, well, would she have been treated differently if she was a Christian? But you can't, the problem is that Jews were the only Dhimma native to Morocco in the 19th century.
Okay.
So, so there isn't really a test case.
Hmm. So when the crowd wanted to desecrate her body and rip her to shreds, that was the way they would have treated anyone who was executed, or did they have special treatment for Jews? Is that not clearly anti-Semitism?
Uh,
Right? Meaning part of the
yeah, yeah,
story, and
yeah,
you could
yeah.
tell
Oh,
it
yeah,
better
yeah,
than I
yeah,
can,
yeah, yeah.
is
Well,
after she
I
was
mean,
executed, they wanted to desecrate her body.
right. So
And
the thing is that
if
it's
someone was
again,
executed for murder, would they have ripped his body apart?
uh, if they were Muslim, it, I don't know. I mean, that's a
Okay.
counterfactual. I don't know.
Okay.
But the fact that she wasn't a Muslim, the fact that it was considered an insult to Islam, and the fact that France had 4 years previously started colonizing Algeria, and the Ummah was up in arms over that, that
Okay.
all contributed to this atmosphere of heightened fanaticism, as the text
Okay.
said.
All right. So, all right. In one of the accounts, and I don't remember if you talked about this in your book. There's, I know you mentioned Yosef ben Naim, who wrote an account about 100 years later.
Right.
and you say it sounds like he's got a lot of eyewitness information. Um, he describes this story of the Muslim. So the earlier sources talk about this woman Tahara, who was the neighbor, the
Right.
Muslim neighbor, who said she converted in my presence. That is, Sol Hatuel converted in front of her. The count in Ben Naim is that the man who lived next door wanted to marry her, and when she spurned him, he then accused her of converting to Islam so he could get her killed,
Right.
or maybe marry
Well,
her.
so there is now I this is I'm not sure what all of Ben Naim's sources were.
Okay.
But if you look at the first chapter, there are of the book, there are accounts by Europeans that talk about uh, a Muslim male neighbor who fell in love with her and
Mhm.
wanted to seduce her. So there is that within the European text. And there's also, there were probably oral sources um, that were transferred between, Fez, between Tangier and Fez, and around, the Moroccan Jewish community, and that perhaps might be a source for that. But the thing about the thing that needs to be realized about Ben Naim is that he's Fezi. He's from Fez. And what I said was that his account sounds like the vividness that he gives of the execution sounds like he could have been there, but of course he wasn't because he was born, decades later, and
Mhm.
his account is in fact a century later. But he probably received, heard stories that were passed down, from one generation to the next of Jews and perhaps maybe in his family who had witnessed the execution because the execution took place in Fez. So, and
Mhm.
the account that he gives is much more detailed of events that take place in Fez than it is of events that take place in Tangier.
Okay. So talk to me about the status of the Jews. Use the word dhimma, which I think many people might be familiar with the term dhimmi or
Yeah,
dhimmitude
yeah, yeah, that's
in English. That's what you're referring to. And these Jews they're not even citizens, they're second class subjects, as you explained.
Yeah. Well, at the
Um,
time, technically nobody was a citizen.
okay.
Citizenship doesn't come until, the Europeans bring the notions of
Okay,
citizenship.
but they're subjects
Yeah.
of this government, and
Right.
and
And
then
they're
by
second
law,
class subjects.
second
Yeah.
class.
Yeah,
Right.
because they're not Muslim.
Um, so there's this notion that we have, or that I hear a lot today, that before Zionism, that everything was wonderful and hunky dory between Jews and Muslims. It was this golden age where we all lived as wonderful, friendly neighbors. And then I read something like this, where she has a fight with her mother, and she runs next door to the neighbor, the woman or the man, whoever the neighbor was, and she ends up getting executed because she refuses to convert to Islam. I mean, that doesn't sound so wonderful. So what am I?
There is a statement
Yeah.
that Ben Dro Yamini said actually made in the 1980s
Hmm.
when I interviewed him. And basically he
And
said,
who is Ben Dror Yamini? I don't know who that
Sandro
is. Sorry.
Yamini, he is a publicist who writes, I think he's writing for Yediot
Okay.
Ahronoth right now.
Israeli newspaper. Okay.
Yeah, an Israeli newspaper. And
Hmm.
he's written a number his position on the Arab-Israeli conflict has evolved over the decades.
Hmm.
In response to events that have evolved over the decades.
Hmm.
But he basically said it wasn't Auschwitz, but it wasn't a five-star hotel, So, and there's a lot of room in between there. So from what I've seen and I also I sort of talk about this in the second chapter, but from what I from my readings and from my discussions, I was 6 months in Morocco in
Hmm.
the mid 1990s, and I interviewed Moroccan Jews. From what I can see, relations between neighbors were were very warm, and in Tangier, unlike in a lot of the other cities, there was no melach, there was no Jewish quarter. So Jews and Muslims, I mean, that one of the reasons why Saul had access to this neighbor was because they shared a courtyard.
Okay.
So there were in a lot of the other cities in Morocco, Jews were confined to a specific quarter, which was called melach. In Tangier, they weren't. So there was interactions between, but there was structural inequality. And from
What does that mean? That sounds like buzzwords. What does structural inequality mean?
basically they were dhimma. They were inferior. They were legally second class citizens. They
Okay.
didn't have equality before the law, and there were restrictions. There were official restrictions that were determined by the Pact of Omar, that were determined by Islamic law.
And one of the things I hear today is that, what's wrong with paying the jizya? The Muslim has to pay the salat, which is like tzedakah, charity,
Right,
and
right.
and the Jew paying the jizya, this dhimmi tax, um, that's just, it's in place of having to serve in the military. But isn't there part of the jizya where it's meant to be humiliating?
Oh yeah, that's it. That they would pay it in humiliation and be humbled. And
Right? There's
there
one
was
account
the
where
structural,
they'll grab the beard and rip it out of the Jew's hand or the dhimmi's hand,
or
like you
yeah, or,
Christians.
or in other words, they pay the jizya and then they get slapped. In other words, there is
Hmm.
a violent act that is involved in it, and many of the Jewish sources, the Jewish Moroccan sources, talk about the jizya, and this is not just true in Morocco. I also saw it in accounts of the history of the Jewish community in the land of Israel, or whatever you Palestine, or whatever you want to call it, when it was under the Ottoman Empire, or when it was under the Fatimids, or Ayyubids, or earlier Muslim empires, where the taxes that they had to pay were exorbitant. And for that reason, the Jewish community, particularly there, was for the most part impoverished.
And just to be clear, these are taxes that Muslims didn't have to pay, right?
No,
Meaning,
Muslims paid the zakat, and there were
tell the
also.
audience what zakat is. I know, but they may
Zakat
not.
is basically the taxes that it's part of the five pillars of Islam that as a Muslim you're supposed to pay. There were also land taxes that were supposed to be paid.
Mhm.
But this particular, and there wasn't any countervailing power within the Ummah, within the Muslim community. There
Mhm.
was a certain countervailing power of Islam itself, and of the ulama, of the Muslim clerics, who could invoke this common religion, and depending on how strong the
Mhm.
sultan, or the king or the caliph was, they could actually, perhaps, if he wasn't strong enough, get him to back down. The Jews had no such power. They had no
Mhm.
countervailing power whatsoever. And of course, as a minority, they couldn't, Muslims would rebel under certain circumstances. There were rebellions. There was no rebellion. I mean, you would have been completely wiped out.
I mean, the
So
Jews didn't have the capacity to rebel if they were mistreated, is
exactly.
what you're trying. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what, as an expert on, and I know you said your time's limited, but just briefly then, as we say, standing on one leg, the
Mhm.
as an expert in anti-Semitism, um, what is this narrative? Explain. And this isn't related necessarily to Sol Hachuel, and I want to talk about her, but what what is this modern narrative that there was this paradise living with under Islam, and it was only because of we only hate you, we Muslims, because of Zionism, right? Where does this come from? Is it Are they gaslighting us? What is going on?
Well, I think that it is so it is it was uh, a, an ideology or a statement or a claim that was sort of popular, in the 1980s, 1990s, in earlier decades, particularly when Arab nationalism was sort of the more dominant ideology in the Middle East.
Okay.
Um, it's a lot harder to make that kind of statement today in the face of, for example, Hamas's writings, Hamas's, charter.
Or the
It's
Houthi flag, which says "Curse upon all the Jews," right? They're not
exactly,
hiding the ball. I mean,
exactly. So, but the thing is that, I hope a person who would be a good person for you to have on to talk
mhm,
more in
yeah.
depth about this would probably be Jeffrey Herf,
Okay.
because he wrote a book on Arab propaganda
Hmm.
or Nazi propaganda in the Arab world during the Holocaust.
Okay.
And
I'm
there
writing this
was
down.
and there was a significant amount of it.
So let's go back to Solhat Shuel. What does it
Uh-huh.
mean she's a martyr? Like, or I mean, so people get executed all the time, probably quite often in I would imagine in 19th century Morocco. What did that like? In other words, when you call her a martyr in the title of your book, that's how the Jews viewed her.
Yes.
What did that mean to the Jews?
That she died B'Kiddush Hashem. She died sanctifying the name.
Which
And
means what for my audience who may not be familiar with that terminology?
okay, so that she died as because she refused to convert because she stayed faithful to her religion. And in
Hmm.
a lot of the Jewish sources, she died while saying the Shema,
Right.
like Rabbi Akiva,
So
so
in one of the poems, it says her soul went out on
Echad,
Be'echad. And at
Be'echad.
first I'm like, what's that? Oh, that's she's saying the last word of the Shema on the word Echad.
Exactly.
Wow.
Which is
And
exactly similar to the accounts of Rabbi Akiva.
so is that just a what's the word? Is that a flowery account, or do you think that really happened that she said the Shema as she died?
I think it might be both. I mean,
Okay. Meaning
l-
it's actually not unusual. There are people today,
you
you'll
know
hear
what?
stories who
I
die
I
saying the Shema.
I I have heard accounts of of the released hostages talking about saying the Shema.
Mm. So actually wanted to ask you about that. There is a
Mhm.
hostage named Rome, and Rome Braslavsky, and he is one of several hostages who have said that they were told, we'll feed you and we won't beat you as much if you convert to
Sure.
Islam.
Yeah.
And then I just heard that like 2 days ago while I was reading about this in preparation for this interview, and I'm like, 1834 and not much has changed, right? The difference is we can fight back now. Sometimes,
Yeah.
I guess we can fight back, not always effectively, sometimes more effectively. What are your thoughts on that as an historian? I mean, in 2025 this kind of thing is still going on?
Well, there you need to sort of look at the whole like history of kind of within the 20th century of Islamic fundamentalism
Hmm.
and its popularity among certain groups of Muslims who are identified with what the Iranians and their supporters call the Mukawama, the resistance. Um,
Okay.
and so that and so 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 people in that group are drawing on Islamic texts to justify their actions and drawing on although the circumstances are thankfully very different.
Mm.
Um, because the state of Israel exists.
Right. So one was backed by a government, and there was nobody she could complain to, and the
Hmm.
other was, well, I mean, it was a government. Hamas was elected as a government, although this was actually Palestinian Islamic Jihad that held Ram. But
Right.
still, I mean, yeah. I have to wonder, some of the hostages who didn't make it, maybe they were killed for that reason. We don't know. Um, let's go back to Sol Hutchwell being a martyr. So I read some of the sources here in Hebrew that you had mentioned, and I went and looked them up. And
Okay.
one of them is a song, or you call it an elegy, I think, by
Yeah.
Chaim Chaliwa. It's sort of like a
Yeah.
dirge.
Yeah.
Um, and I want to read some of
I
this.
haven't looked at the Hebrew sources in like I haven't actually
That's
looked at
fair.
15 years. So
All right, that's fair. I'm putting you on the spot, but so I'll read this part. So he says, and she also as a panez, she had the chutzpah, right, basically, to
okay.
say, it's better to trust in God, in Hashem, than to trust in, which is from the Psalms, right? Than
Yeah.
to trust in benefactors. And then she said, who would replace the water of Diomsit, which is probably like a hot spring at Emmaus, these beautiful living waters, with the stagnant water of pools.
Mhm.
And so then here's the response. When they heard, they were very angry, um, and they were ravenous like dogs. And it says here, Kazev. So this is the false accusation against her, right? In the words of the poet, right? Is a poet in the 1830s or something, 1840s maybe. Kazev kazeh dibra hana'ara me'eretz Yisrael dvarim asher lo tovim. Like this and like that has spoken the girl, and this is interesting, from the land of Israel, bad things, meaning they're falsely accusing her.
Mhm.
So that's interesting. I didn't know what to make of that. She was born in Tangier and died in Fez. She had
Yeah.
never stepped foot in the land of Israel. But in the mind of the poet, the Arabs see them as foreigners in Morocco, right? The
Mhm.
Jews see themselves for sure as exiles from the
Yes.
land of Israel. And
Right.
as exiles, you're foreigners who you're this foreign entity. It's like I mean, it's not like, it's the reason that if a Jew, a Moroccan Jew today says I'm an Arab Jew, every Arab in the world laughs at them, because no, you're a foreigner from the land, from Palestine, right, or from some
Well,
other place.
it's not, I wouldn't say every Arab in the Arab world is there's the
Most Arabs would laugh at that if you. Most Jews for sure would laugh if you said
yeah,
I'm an
yeah,
Arab
yeah,
Jew
yeah.
as a Moroccan Jew.
Yeah, there are some. So the situation with Morocco is really interesting, including with Moroccan Jews, many Moroccan Jews today,
Hmm.
particularly in Israel. There is this like fond memory of life in Morocco. Um,
They'll have pictures of the king in
Perhaps,
their living room. I've seen it.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
The king of Morocco.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. And so there is, and I think there's sort of the nostalgia for what isn't there anymore, and for an idealized version of the past versus a contemporary everyday life in Israel, which can be really hard. So
Hmm.
there's that element. And then there's this, and then there is the fact that in the 20th century, the Moroccan kings were seen as extremely close to the Jewish community,
Okay.
and Mohammed V is credited with refusing the Vichy orders to deliver the Jews, to the Nazis. To what extent that um, was is an overstatement, and at what point in World War II did he make this statement?
Hmm.
Did he make it when it wasn't clear who was going to win the war? Did he make it when the
Hmm.
Americans were about to land in North Africa? So that's also. But he is revered by Moroccan Jews as someone who protected the Jewish community.
And even in the accounts, or at least one of the Hebrew accounts, I think it was Ben Naim, he
Yeah,
says something to the effect of, "Well, the king didn't really want to execute her, but the
yeah, a
but the
lot
but
of
the
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 fanatics.
Muslim authorities didn't give him a choice. He's like, all
Yeah,
right, this is the law. I can't do anything about it." So
yeah.
it's kind of like, he's not an absolute monarch. meaning he is maybe in some or was in some respect, but also he's got to give in to the religious authorities. Um, okay, so I want to maybe shift gears here and talk a little bit about this idea of her as a martyr,
Hmm.
because a lot of my audience, even part of the certainly the non-Jews and even some of the Jews, will be like, wait, we don't have saints in Judaism.
Yeah.
What's this about? And there's that tension within the
Mistranslation.
story that
Yeah,
she's
yeah,
called Lala Solika.
yeah, yeah.
Solika was the like diminutive name, or maybe that's the original name actually, Zulecha, right? Meaning soul is the diminutive name, and Solika was probably her more original name, right?
Well, no, no, I think it's the other way around,
Oh,
but
okay, all
yeah,
right.
yeah.
So so soul is the original name meaning son, you think?
I'm not absolutely sure, but
Okay,
I think so. Yeah.
and
I
then
mean, those
so
are all the
okay,
sources.
and does that reflect her being a descendant of Jewish refugees from Spain?
Yeah, Megorashim. Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
So she's okay, and then that would explain maybe her blonde hair, which is a bizarre detail I read there, and I'm like, wait, what? Why would they even mention that? Right? So there's this description that when they're smuggling her body out of the
yeah.
square,
One of
somebody
the
gets a glimpse of her blonde curls.
yeah, yeah.
What was that about?
Yeah, that is part of Ben Naim's story. I'm not sure, how to interpret that. But if you look at the
Okay.
photo, if you look at the photo in the book, you see that there is a painting, a
Hmm.
lithograph that is attributed. It's in the Emma Banim Cemetery. I mean, Emma Banim Museum, which is right next to the Beit HaChaim, right in Fez. So there is a lithograph of a young
Hmm.
woman with light skin and black hair in the painting in itself, and then around the frame there is this there is this like blonde wig pigtail basically around the top of the frame,
Hmm.
and that is reflecting that element in Ben Naim in the Ben Naim
Okay.
story. But there are different versions of what her hair color is and what she looked
Right.
like,
In the European,
depending
she
on the
has
source.
jet black hair or something
Yeah,
like that,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Raven black hair, I think.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
all right. So, so there's this Ben Naim relates that they called her Lala Solika, which is something like Saint Solika, and
Well,
she,
Lala is an honorific term for lady. It's like
okay,
it's lady. It's like lady. It's an honorific. It's a term for someone who it's a term of respect that's given to Muslim women in
Muslim woman.
in
Isn't it
Moroccan
like the Virgin
society.
Mary called Lala? I think you said in the book. Is that right?
Not
Or
I don't talk about the
oh,
Virgin Mary.
okay, all right. I read that somewhere.
No,
that
no,
that she's called Lala Maria or something like that. But all right. In any event, so according to Ben Naim, she appears in a dream and says, "Stop calling me Lala, because I fought not to be a Muslim. Why are you calling me Lala?"
yeah, yeah.
So what was this? So explain what saint veneration was in 19th century and maybe 20th century Jewish Morocco. My well, I won't say who. Somebody I know had a Moroccan boyfriend who swore that if you left a glass of water on the grave of the Baba Sali and drank it the next day, it would heal any ailments.
Yeah,
And when I heard that in the 90s, I thought like, wait, is this what? That's not Judaism I grew up with. So what
right.
is this saint veneration?
Well, the saint it's kind of a mistranslation of Sadiq,
Okay, is
right?
it a mistranslation? Sadiq means righteous person. Saint
Right,
is
right,
holy
right,
person, right? I mean,
right, right. A righteous or a
okay.
holy person, because it's not. Look, these are not saints like the Catholic Church saints. You don't like save parts of their bodies and and revere them
But you
or
go to the grave and you pray to them, don't you? I mean,
you go, yeah. So you go to the grave. Okay, so there are hilulot to the grave,
what are
and
hilulot? Tell the audience what that
so
is.
hilulot are pilgrimages to the grave site, and
Hmm.
the most sort of famous one and the most massive one is Shimon Bar Yochai on
Hmm.
Lag BaOmer.
So he's a
Um,
second century rabbi who in the
yeah.
13th century was credited with writing the Zohar.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So, and there's a huge Hilula
And
for
I
him.
think there's over 1 million people who go every year, meaning it's not some small, like literally a
It,
million.
but it built up over time because I went on it with Yoram
Hmm.
Bilo in the 1990s
Okay.
when I was a graduate student at Hebrew University. And Yoram Bilo is a professor of anthropology, and he's written a lot on the veneration of the
Hmm.
Moroccan veneration of Sadiqi.
Okay.
And so we went in the 1990s, and the main groups that were there were North African Jews, especially Moroccans,
Really?
and and Hasidim, Haredim. Those were the groups that were there. But
Wow.
it wasn't a million people. There were maybe 100,000, and you could
Still
walk
a
around.
lot.
Well, but they
100,000 is a lot of people even now.
right,
I mean,
right. Well, actually, I don't even think there was that much because you could walk around. I
okay.
was able to walk around. I went in on the women's side.
Hmm.
I was able to, stand in front of the tomb
Yeah.
and watch while, while people were walking around with trays of couscous and offering people food, and people were
Mm.
praying, and there were people who were sitting there. I have some photos of this, of people who were sitting there, just sitting there on the ground praying, you know,
Hmm.
and there was room to move. It
Okay.
wasn't like, you weren't packed like sardines.
And
And then,
literally a few years ago, there was a trampling where people were, I
yes,
think they were
yes,
killed or something.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay.
So it is just in terms of it's uh, like in terms of popularity and how many people actually go or try to go, it's just like been
So
massive.
how did this translate to, or how does this translate to Solika over the last, let's say, 200 years?
Well, I was at her like I was there in like 1984, and when I was there, the day that I was there, I was the only one, there. The person who's in charge of the cemetery allowed me to go in, and I went in, and that's where I took the photo. And from as far as I know, there are no Hilulot for her, although there was one that took place in Canada.
Really?
Yeah, yeah. I talk about
But in
that.
the 19th century, they weren't going to her grave to pray? It sounds like they
No,
were from the
people were.
poems.
They
Oh, they
were,
were. Okay.
but there wasn't like an organized one day. From what I've seen from the
Okay.
sources, there wasn't really an organized one day Hilula the way
Okay.
there was for Rabbi Chaim Pinto or for David Moshe or the other famous Moroccan rabbis where there are, these annual pilgrimages. In some cases to Morocco, in
Mhm.
other cases to places in Israel.
So
Um,
I want to read from this poem here because when I read this, I'm okay. I'm familiar with this, but I think it's still shocking to me,
okay.
and it justifies the title of your book, Martyr, meaning she wasn't just martyred for her religion; she was really seen in Moroccan Judaism as a saint, or tzaddiket, right? Is the term they
Yeah,
use, right?
yeah.
But the parallel to saint there is I'm not sure the Christians didn't get that from us. And I'm not trying to be funny, meaning
Hmm.
like obviously a lot of things they got from us. So
Yeah.
Chaim Chaliwa, he writes in a poem Amashel Nivcharu. He says, and this is my translation:
Okay.
"Children of God, every man who is poor and scrawny, worship God on this mountain, entreat her face, that she may pray to her God, spread out her hands with supplication and prayer." That
Hmm.
really sounds like they're going to the grave and asking for intercession. It's in
Yeah.
Hebrew, Bakshu paneha tidrosh Eloheha, tifros kapeha tchina utfila, right? So they're
Hmm.
going to her, asking her to pray on their behalf. So
Yeah.
no, so can you explain
The
that? Like,
merit, yeah. So the idea of the merit of the Sadiq is it will grant, the supplicant um like I don't know, favors with the Hakadosh Baruch Hu, with the Holy One, blessed be He. So that's I think that is that's what's being expressed. That the idea
So because she died b'kiddush Hashem as a martyr,
yeah.
she can pray to God on your behalf.
Yeah, her merit is yeah.
Even though she's dead, right? Meaning
Yeah.
that, okay. And then there's this idea of her blood as a sacrifice. You talk about that in the book. Can you say something about that?
You have been listening to Hebrew Voices with Nehemia Gordon. Thank you for supporting Nehemia's Makor Hebrew Foundation. Learn more at nehemiaswall.com.